You've been told to be more resilient, to push through, to keep going. But what if this belief that resilience is the cure all and us telling ourselves to just power through is exactly what's keeping you stuck? I know you've climbed the ladder, you've led through crisis, you've kept your teams focused and your family grounded, but you're exhausted in a way that another yoga class or another weekend away just won't fix. When I was younger, I used to bounce back quickly. After a grueling 60-hour work week, a Sunday in my pajamas with a slate of Lifetime movies was usually enough to do the trick. And then enter children, dogs, an aging mother, an aging self, client needs, responsibilities. And a Sunday in PJs is not only harder to come by, but also no longer enough to replenish my depleted self. Sometimes I'm just bone tired, weary. Weary in a way I didn't know was possible because it's not just physical. We're holding the emotional weight and responsibility of raising humans, a lot of us, and holding space for their struggles and their dreams. And the emotional weight of our bosses, our clients, and teams who have expectations and needs, well, we're holding those too. And then if you have a partner, you might be holding their emotional weight and they have their own struggles and needs. It's a lot. So, this message is for every executive woman who has been applauded for her strength, but quietly wonders at what cost. Today, we're pulling back the curtain because perhaps resilience isn't the whole answer. And the women who are actually thriving right now, well, they've learned to do something different. So before we dive in, what is resilience anyway? I've always thought of it as the ability to stretch and bounce back in the face of stress and challenges. Basically, how emotionally and psychologically tough you are. Can you absorb a lot, bend, but not break? And that's my definition, but let's get a more official one. The American Psychological Association defines resilience as the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. And this, they say, is especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustments to external and internal demands. So that all sounds good, right? And I admit, I have piles of books on resilience and grit that I've collected over the years as I've coached my clients, high achieving women through leadership challenges, career pivots, personal setbacks, and the like. And I personally do believe that being resilient is really important. Having the mental and emotional fortitude to withstand and recover from difficulties can be critical, especially in our modern and seemingly one challenge after another society. But is it enough? So, I want to talk about a few things that few people actually say out loud. Resilience, while often celebrated, can quietly mask burnout, especially for high achieving women. On the surface, you may appear composed and capable, delivering results and holding it all together. But underneath, there may be a chronic exhaustion that doesn't go away with a good night's sleep. This kind of high functioning burnout is unfortunately incredibly common. Relying on resilience in these cases can become a double edged sword because, yes, it keeps you going, but it also keeps you from stopping long enough to check in with yourself. And in that situation, you may miss the early warning signs, the irritability, the forgetfulness, the quiet sense of numbness. And because you're so good at managing, those around you may not notice either. And over time, what seemed like strength can become a mask, one that hides just how much you've been carrying and how deeply you might need rest, care, and change. And then, before you know what's happening, you are in survival mode. And your primary tool, well, that sometimes becomes overfunctioning. something that many high performing women don't even realize that they're doing. And overfunctioning shows up when you consistently do more than is healthy for you. And often you're covering for broken systems, unclear roles, or underperforming colleagues or partners. And it's easy to fall into the role of fixer, especially when your reputation is built on reliability and strength. But here's the truth: when you absorb the dysfunction around you, you teach others that they don't have to rise. Your resilience becomes a silent permission slip for everyone else to stay small, disorganized, or avoid accountability. And while you keep delivering, your own needs begin to disappear into the background. Now, this constant state of overextension, well, it's often praised. You're seen as indispensable, but it's not sustainable. Over time, you may start to believe that your value lies only in how much you produce or how many fires you can put out. And then, without firm boundaries, resilience quietly transforms into over responsibility, where your self worth is tied to output. And I'll tell you, that's a dangerous place for a leader to live. And this can also be damaging to your nervous system, something that I would say is one of the most overlooked leadership assets that you have. Constant pressure, high stakes decisions, and nonstop responsiveness push your body into chronic fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. You may look composed on the outside, but internally, your system is often flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, this creates this vicious cycle because it disrupts your sleep, your focus, and your ability to emotionally regulate, undermining your capacity for clear strategic thinking. And here's the paradox: the more skilled you are, the less anyone suspects that you're actually running on fumes. Your nervous system was not designed to be in survival mode 24/7. It needs recovery, rhythm, and regulation. But executive women, well, you rarely get that because we've been conditioned to push through rather than slow down. And the truth is, sustainable leadership starts with a regulated nervous system. That means making space for practices that calm, reset, and replenish you, and preferably within a space and community that understands the depth of what you're carrying and gives you the tools to lead without burning out. Relying on resilience can also lead us down a path where we suppress our own emotions simply in order to survive. High achieving women are often masters of emotional control. We've learned to stay calm under pressure, hold space for everyone else's feelings, and smile through the stress. But here's the thing: emotions don't disappear when you suppress them, they just get buried deeper. That tightness in your chest, that edge in your tone, those forgotten tears in the shower, those are signs that something is asking to be felt. Emotional suppression might help you perform leadership, but it distances you from your own intuition and humanity. And that disconnect, well, that can be incredibly costly, impacting your relationships, your physical health, and your sense of joy. The best leaders I know, they're emotionally healthy, or at least trying to be, and they're doing or have done the inner work to get there. And doing that, well, honestly, it requires reflection, regulation, and supportive environments, spaces where you don't always have to be the strong one. This idea of being the strong one, the one with all of the answers, the put together one, it makes us hide vulnerability and it discourages seeking help. One of the greatest myths we tell ourselves, and I admit I used to tell myself this a lot, is that asking for help is somehow a weakness. That if you were really capable, you'd have it all figured out. But that belief is exactly what keeps so many brilliant women stuck in silence. You might be the one everyone turns to, the one who always has it together. And that role can feel impossible to step out of. But no one can sustain leadership in isolation. Even the most successful women need support systems that aren't just reactive, but proactive. The longer you wait to ask for help, the heavier the burden becomes. Asking for help doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're smart enough to recognize that collective wisdom is more powerful than lone endurance. What high achieving women need most right now are trusted, guided spaces with women who get it. That's not weakness, my friend. That's leadership maturity. This need to be the strong one can also reinforce my old friend, perfectionism. Perfectionism hides behind achievement. It whispers, if I just do more, better, faster, flawlessly, then I'll be safe. I'll be respected. I'll be enough. But perfectionism is exhausting. It steals your peace, it robs your creativity, and it keeps you chasing an ever moving finish line. It's performing to avoid criticism, disappointment, or failure. But let's be clear, perfectionism isn't excellence. It's fear wrapped up in a cape. When your self-worth is tied to performance, every misstep feels like a threat. And this is a big one that I see a lot in high-achieving women. So much of our lives are built upon winning: grades, awards, sports, jobs, promotions, etc. And it's very hard to not get your self-worth and sense of identity wrapped up into that. But here's the thing. Performing can hook you to perfectionism. That then becomes a trap that leaves you surviving on fumes and unsure of your worth. You can't lead or make decisions from that place because you're just trying to survive. The women I work with who finally let go and take off the mask, well, they lead more powerfully, with more compassion and more authenticity. And yes, they still achieve incredible things, but now they do it from a deep place of confidence and purpose. And speaking of purpose, I feel like purpose gets a bad rap these days. And I get that trying to build a life birthed from a sense of purpose can feel like a privilege, and I suppose it is. But even with acknowledging that point, purpose is one of the most powerful antidotes to burnout and one of the first things that often disappears under the weight of overwork. Because think about it, when you're stuck in constant doing, it's easy to lose sight of why you even started in the first place. You hit the milestones, you get the promotion, but you feel strangely disconnected from your joy. Purpose is what gives meaning to the grind. It turns tasks into contribution. And without it, everything begins to feel hollow, even the things that once lit you up. The best leaders I know are anchored in something much deeper than just being productive. They're guided by a personal mission that aligns their work with their values. I would argue that reconnecting to your purpose isn't fluffy, it's strategic. It keeps you steady when the world feels shaky. And in a community of like-minded women, with the right mirrors that they can hold up for you and the right questions that they can gently ask you, rediscovering your purpose and then leading from that place becomes not only possible, but it becomes the way you show up. So, if resilience isn't the magic tool that we need to not only survive, but to thrive in these arguably stressful and chaotic times, then what can we do? I'll tell you, I've been through, well, a lot. And something I'll hear people say to me is, you don't look like what you've been through. Why not? The key for me, I'd say, was threefold. First, I had to get real and acknowledge what I was experiencing and what I was feeling. And this part stinks. And we, especially high achieving types, well, we want to skip this part. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about wallowing and living as a victim for the rest of your life. But when things are tough, first we need to acknowledge that it sucks. It's hard. What you're experiencing may be unfair, may be really painful. Being laid off stinks. Getting divorced stinks. Receiving a negative medical report, well, that stinks too. Not getting the job or promotion you wanted, that stinks. I hear you. I see you. We have to hold space to acknowledge what's happening, to grieve what was lost, and to feel what we feel. But second is to not get stuck there. For me, what was important is to face what the external experience brings out of me. What buttons are being pushed? What fears, long buried, are being resurfaced? What wounds, covered over, are being exposed? And this is where I'd argue we have a choice. As people say, we can get bitter or better. This may mean giving up your right to be angry, to be bitter, to be the victim. Because I'll be honest, it's not serving you anyway. And this is also a step a lot of people skip because it's not fun. So then they either get stuck in victim and wallowing, or, and maybe worse, they get stuck in anger and bitterness, and both are unhealthy. The best leaders aren't the ones who bury their emotions. They're the ones who know how to work with their emotions. Being able to manage your emotions, to be agile emotionally, well, this capacity to notice what you're feeling, name it, and choose your response instead of being hijacked by it, well, that's key. When you develop this muscle, you move through stress, conflict, and uncertainty with clarity and calm. And it's not about being emotionally reactive or emotionally removed. It's about being emotionally wise. Leaders who are emotionally agile build trust quickly. They create psychological safety on their teams. I'll put it to you this way. When's the last time you felt emotionally safe to take risks and speak up? When you had a boss or colleagues who regularly blew their fuse? When people yell, scream, insult, slam doors, punch walls, or even sometimes when people cry extremely easily, do you feel the freedom to show up fully? Because I know I don't. And I've worked in environments where all of this happened. Working in an environment where you have to walk on eggshells, where you are shamed or punished for asking the wrong question or sometimes any questions, because remember, you're supposed to already know everything. Or if you get shamed or punished for making a mistake, well, that just stifles growth. And in the end, it dulls performance. Leaders who are emotionally in tune, well, they're empowered to foster cultures where people thrive, not just survive. This is the emotional edge that can turn pressure into presence, and it's built, not born. I know self-awareness is an overused term, but being aware of what's really going on with you and not running away from it, but rather embracing it, well, that's key. And I believe it's one of the most powerful yet undervalued leadership tools. In a world of endless decisions and competing demands, it's easy to slip into reactive leadership. But when you truly know your values, your triggers, and your blind spots, well, then you begin to lead from alignment, not adrenaline. Self-awareness helps to ground you. It clears the mental clutter and restores your ability to respond with intention, not just instinct. And in noisy environments where everyone wants your attention, being connected to your inner voice, well, that's a superpower. And it's not just about internal clarity. Leaders who cultivate self-awareness, they build trust, empathy, and authenticity across their teams. They lead with depth, and depth that comes from pausing long enough to actually hear yourself again. So once we acknowledge what's going on and identify what's coming up for us, then the third thing I had to do is I had to make space to heal, to grow, to evolve, and to transform. And I'll be honest, this takes time and courage. and someone, or ideally lots of someone's, to hold space for you, to remind you of the truth of who you really are, to help you cast a vision of where you're going next. And in order to get there, it's really powerful to be able to have real conversations in the right rooms. You know that feeling, surrounded by people and still feeling deeply alone in your leadership. That's why the rooms you choose to be in matters. You need a place where you don't have to wear the mask, where real talk is not only welcomed, but encouraged. In the right leadership circles, you get to drop the performance. With like-minded women, they become mirrors and they help you see the brilliance you can't always see in yourself, and the blind spots that you didn't know were holding you back. These are spaces designed for vulnerability without judgment, for growth without ego, and for honesty without hierarchy. When high-achieving women gather intentionally, something powerful happens. Your thinking expands, your clarity sharpens, and your capacity grows. You don't just feel seen, you feel ignited. A circle of peers has absolutely been essential on my journey. I've joined programs and paid experiences to help me move forward. I'm also fortunate that in my peers, I have access to a lot of coaches and many wise executive leaders. And I'll be honest, historically, I was a very private person and I didn't like participating in any group experiences, especially not when walking through something that I found to be deeply personal and challenging. But what I have learned is that sometimes you can actually understand something more clearly, including a challenge, when you witness it in someone else's life. Think about it this way. Have you ever listened to a friend discuss a challenge and the solution seems really straightforward to you? And you're kind of wondering why they struggle to find or implement the solution? Or have you ever seen someone making decisions and you just know they're making it out of fear? And you come alongside them and maybe shake them a little bit and you say, come on, you can absolutely do this. And then often when that happens, you have an aha, like, wait, is that what I'm doing? Because you look at them and then you say, of course you can do this. And as the words come out of your mouth, the light bulb goes off and the epiphany goes ping. And you go, wait a minute, that means so can I. Because here's the truth. It just is the truth. Insight and transformation come faster by being in the right room and guided by the right people. A well-facilitated circle provides more than just support. It provides structured reflection, wise perspective, and collective wisdom. When you hear another woman speak the things you didn't know how to say, something shifts. You soften, you see, and you grow. In these spaces, there's no need to perform, and you get to bring your full self. And in so doing, you unlock clarity and courage that you didn't know that you had. The conversations are rich, the insights are catalytic, and the impact is profound. A curated circle helps you to do that. I had coffee with a friend recently. She's a C-suite executive and was sharing how others don't seem to appreciate how little time she has. And instead of her having to provide proof or a laundry list of reasons, which is what she felt like she had to do to justify why she wasn't able to meet with others who had requested her time, there was a knowing. It only took one sentence from her for me to understand the breadth and the weight of what she was carrying, to mirror her strain back to her, to validate her feelings, and to provide the encouragement she needed to lay down the stress. Why? Because as someone who walks and coaches women who follow a similar path, there's a shorthand, a knowing. And that, my friends, is priceless. It's easy to underestimate the emotional cost of having to prove, justify, and explain our pain or stress or overwhelm. Because then, on top of already feeling stretched too thin, there will be those in our lives, personal and professional, who will discount our struggle. And frankly, it's exhausting to have to somehow not only prove, but also justify how you're feeling. And then beyond peers holding space, I've also needed guides, people who were ahead of me on my journey or held a wisdom, an experience, or an expertise that I needed. I needed those people to come alongside me as a wayfinder and help me to navigate what I was going through, but also to call out the leader in me. Because here's how I think about it: peers are great mirrors. A good coach is like an excavator who can see past the muck and identify the greatness that's buried. And then a good coach can gently guide you and at times provide a little tough love and hold you accountable to help you move forward. And this isn't a one and done. This is a lifelong journey. And I know for my situation, it's frustrating to my friends to hear me drone about what I can't do when I regularly call out the greatness in them. And in fact, I was doing that recently. A good friend of mine who was a great executive coach reminded me of who I am, set up systems to hold me accountable, pushed me way outside of my comfort zone, and regularly kicked my butt as needed. As an executive woman, you're past the point of needing generic advice. You don't need another checklist. You need strategic coaching and guidance that meets you at your level, the kind that understands the complexity of your life, your leadership, and your ambition. Great coaching offers more than feedback. It offers reflection, recalibration, guidance, and presence. It says, I see you. Now let's refine this together. And then when guidance and coaching are grounded in both wisdom and compassion, they become a catalyst for clarity and courage. They help you lead with purpose and see possibilities where before there was only pressure. This is the kind of support that helps you lead not just effectively, but powerfully and sustainably. Because sometimes the hardest part is simply not knowing which direction to move in next. You're competent, you're obviously capable, but you're too close to your own situation to see it clearly. And this is where coaching becomes invaluable. A seasoned coach helps you zoom out, connecting the dots, revealing blind spots, and reconnecting you to your own wisdom. And at least for me, coaching certainly isn't about giving you answers. It's about helping you ask better questions. It gives you the tools to realign your strategy with your values and your vision. And when it's done in tandem with reflection and community, well, that's where the momentum happens. And not the frantic kind that drains you, but the clear, grounded kind that propels you forward with purpose. Because I suspect you don't need another productivity system. You need a strategic recalibration. Another powerful way that I recalibrate is figuring out what feeds me and then incorporating more of that, and then not beating myself up for it. So, for example, sitting outside, looking at nature, and listening to birds, with or without the Merlin app, feeds me. But I used to beat myself up for it. And I would say things in my head like, you should be in your office working instead of, well, just sitting. And my coach helped me to give myself permission to just be. Because I'll tell you, my ability to recover from shocks to the system, to support others as they struggle, my ability to be creative, it's directly proportional to my allowing myself to have the space to breathe. Rest isn't a reward you get after everything is done. It's the lever that makes everything work better. Innovation, creativity, clarity, they don't come from exhaustion and burnout. They come from recovery. When you're well rested, your brain makes faster connections, your intuition is sharper, and your presence is magnetic. The highest performers in the world, from CEOs to athletes, they understand that rest is a key part of their strategy. And yet, for so many executive women, rest still feels optional. It feels like a luxury that we don't allow ourselves to have. I'll tell you, rest, it's not a luxury, it's essential. When you start protecting rest, the way you protect your calendar, your entire leadership approach transforms. You go from operating in survival mode to leading with grounded clarity and power. So let me be clear, this discussion is not abandoning resilience. It's about redefining it, replacing relentless grit with reflection, restoration, and real connection. The most powerful women I know aren't pushing harder. They're choosing differently. They're finding spaces to be seen, supported, and recentered. So, if this resonated, send it to a friend or a colleague, someone else who's holding it all together, because we were never meant to lead alone.